Chicago, 1871. It was a toddling town, a city of big shoulders and even bigger dreams. People came to seek their fortunes. Houses sprang up as fast as building materials could be found. Chicago was unstoppable. Until Mrs. O'Leary's cow, Daisy, kicked over a lantern and started the Great Chicago Fire. Mrs. O'Leary's house is long gone, and today, this fire academy stands on the spot where the old house and barn used to be. It's a good reminder that you can't be too careful around fire and the equipment that makes it. Welcome to the CERTA Roofing Torch Safety Program. Today, we're going to look at some specific safety procedures and precautions for using torching equipment when installing polymer-modified bitumen products. The CERTA program was developed to keep roofing workers safe and make sure the buildings they work on and the people inside them are secure from the dangers of fire. And you are the key to its success. Ready? Let's get started. An open flame is dangerous. It can be a helpful tool for roofers, or cause terrible damage and injury if safety procedures are not followed. Safety on a roofing job site is the responsibility of the roofing contractor and each crew member. And a roofing contractor must ensure that any worker who uses a torch is properly trained and certified. If you are not sure about torching work practices or situations you come across on the job, ask your foreman or supervisor. Don't proceed with your work if you're not certain you are working safely. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, is required for torch operations where hot material or equipment can burn your skin. Protect yourself by wearing a long-sleeved shirt, buttoned or snug at the neck, and cuffs tight at the wrists. Wear long pants without cuffs that reach down over the tops of your work boots. Cuffs can catch hot bitumen and keep it on you, increasing the severity of burn. Boots should be ankle-high and have solid rubber soles. Leather is preferred, and synthetic materials must be avoided because of their low flame resistance. Wear heavy leather gloves with cuffs to protect your hands. And if there's a possibility of danger from above or from flying objects or material, wear an ANSI Z89 approved hard hat. ANSI Z87 approved safety glasses, goggles, or a face shield will help protect your eyes from heat flashes and other flying debris on a job site. Hot torch heads, trowels, or heated roofing membrane can all cause serious burns. Direct contact with liquid propane can cause a skin injury like frostbite, so it's important for you to protect yourself and to know what to do in a medical emergency. If someone gets burned, call immediately for an ambulance. Emergency operators will need to know your exact location, so it's important that the street address for the job site is posted in an area that all workers can see it. While you wait for professional assistance, irrigate or bathe the burned area in cool water. Do not apply antiseptic, salves, or lotions of any kind. Also, don't try to remove any clothing or bitumen that may be stuck to a burn or wound. This is best done at a hospital by medical professionals. If possible, help the injured worker move to a shaded area or air-conditioned room, away from the sun and heat. Now, let's look at some facts about fire during installation of torch-applied roof systems. Combustible materials don't have to come in contact with a flame to start a fire. If air from a fire becomes hot enough, those high temperatures can cause building materials to ignite, and workers must be aware that heat and flame from a torch head can penetrate gaps and openings and ignite material far below the work surface. Also, smoke, not flames, is often the real killer in a fire. Smoke may contain poisonous gases that can incapacitate you quickly. Whenever you see smoke, investigate it immediately. If it poses a threat to workers, have them evacuate the roof in an orderly and prompt manner. One mandatory piece of equipment on roofing job sites involving torch work is a fire extinguisher. Anytime you use torching equipment, there must be a minimum of 2 4A 60BC rated fire extinguishers within 10 feet of torching operations. The contents of a fire extinguisher are under pressure, so it is very important not to expose a fire extinguisher to open flame or heat so that it doesn't explode. And fire extinguishers must be readily accessible with no obstacles blocking the path to reach one. Fire extinguishers must be checked each day of use to make sure the indicator is in the operable range and they have no physical damage. Defective, rechargeable extinguishers must be taken out of service and recharged, following the correct procedures. A tag showing the month and year of service should be placed on the extinguisher. Non-rechargeable fire extinguishers must be discarded and replaced if they show a reading outside the operable range. To help you remember how to properly use a fire extinguisher, use the pass system. First, pull the pin. Then, from a safe distance, aim the nozzle at the base of the fire. Squeeze the handle and sweep the stream from side to side to cover the entire area. Remember, that's pass, pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Notice how quickly that fire extinguisher we just showed you emptied out? That's why the fire department must be called immediately when you have a fire. Once you've done what you can to put out a fire, or if the fire is too overpowering, evacuate all workers from the roof, leave the area immediately, alert people inside the building, and let trained firefighters do the rest. For every job that involves torching, a daily inspection must be performed by the foreman or supervisor. A daily checklist needs to be completed to help identify all potential hazards. You'll find one in your student manual. A daily checklist should include all the hazards you learned about in your student manual. Things like fall hazards, rooftop equipment, deck conditions, combustible materials. In addition, supervisors need to be aware of the local fire code and safety regulations and ensure their crews comply with those rules. Inspect daily with the building owner or their representative for conditions that might present hazards during torching operations, such as flammable and combustible materials stored under the roof deck, in attic space, or adjacent to the building. The inspections must be done on a daily basis since conditions may change, particularly in fully operational buildings. Inform the building owner of the need to relocate or protect those materials. Combustible or flammable materials should be stored a minimum of 20 feet from torching work. Flammable liquids must be 50 feet away from torching operations. Keep the torching area clear of loose trash and debris. On a windy day, loose debris like paper, cardboard, or plastic can blow into an open flame and start a fire. Prohibit smoking on job sites, especially where there is propane gas. It's just too dangerous. Make sure appropriate fall protection, like guardrails, personal fall arrest systems, or warning lines, are properly set up according to OSHA requirements. Inspect the work area for safe placement of propane tanks, and make sure workers are able to move propane tanks easily as work progresses, while keeping hoses untangled. Placing tanks on a hand truck or dolly makes this easier. Make sure tanks are secured against unintended movement and that protective collars, valves, and bases are in good condition. Propane gas is heavier than air, so it can collect or pool in low or poorly ventilated areas. Combustion gases from a torch can also collect in confined areas. Inspect the work area for locations that may be a problem in this regard. You may need to set up special explosion-proof fans designed for hazardous locations in these areas to properly ventilate them without igniting the propane. The job inspection must identify the nature of the roof deck and whether it's combustible and has to be protected before torching to it. We'll discuss this in more detail in Part 4. An inspection should identify other dangerous conditions and combustible components, including windowsills, door thresholds, wood siding, HVAC and utility pipes or conduits, air intakes, vents, skylights, drains, and scuppers. Inspect for other hidden hazards, such as flammable vapors and gases from air vents and exhaust fans, combustible materials under counterflashings and copings, and lint, sawdust, or grease inside mechanical equipment. If 911 emergency service is not available at the job location, post the emergency phone number of the local fire department near the roof access point. Not all areas have cellular service, so all crew members should know the location of the closest operable landline telephone, and each crew should have at least one cell phone with a fully charged battery. Program the local fire department's number into cell phones before the job starts. Most roofing torches are fueled by propane, which is extremely flammable. Propane is kept under high pressure in a steel cylinder. If a cylinder is damaged or handled improperly, it could explode. Carefully inspect valves, cylinders, pressure regulators, torches and torching trolleys, and hoses and connections for damage. Test all connections and couplings for leaks with a soapy water solution. If you see bubbles at any of these points, you've got a leak, and a potentially serious problem. Secure any loose connections with a wrench and tag any damaged hoses and take them out of service. Also, keep hose lengths as short as possible. It is recommended that no more than 2 coupled sections are used, and total hose length not exceed 30 feet between the cylinder and your torch. Shorter hose length means it will be easier and safer to move around torching equipment as you work. Never pull on the hose to move the propane tank. All hand torches have a burner head, leg stand, neck tube, pilot control valve, trigger, handle, inlet connection. A torch should have a leg stand that directs the flame away from the roof surface when the torch is temporarily set down. Torching trolleys or wagons speed up production when installing field plies. You'll learn more about them later in this program. One of the most important components in a torch assembly is the pressure regulator. It safely controls the flow of pressurized gas. The regulator must be compatible with the torch, and your supervisor should be able to verify that it's correct. Keep the vent hole on the regulator clear of dirt and debris. Some regulators increase the pressure when turned clockwise. Others decrease pressure. Adjustable regulators may have a pressure gauge that reads the pressure level. Regulators without pressure gauges are typically manufactured at a preset pressure. Know how your particular torch's regulator works. There are 2 types of propane tank systems: vapor withdrawal and liquid withdrawal systems. Most torches used in roofing employ the vapor withdrawal system, in which propane is released in vapor form at the top of the tank through a valve, regulator, and hose to the torch. The tank has mostly liquid propane in it and a small portion of vapor at the top. Liquid propane turns into vapor as it is released from the top of the tank. The safety of the vapor withdrawal system requires the tank to be upright, so liquid propane is not discharged through the valve. You can learn more about liquid withdrawal systems in your student manual. Sometimes frost forms on a propane tank, usually because the propane is being drawn out too quickly. If this happens, change to a smaller torch or a larger tank to minimize the buildup of frost, and never turn the tank on its side or use a torch to melt the frost. Propane cylinders should be kept at least 10 feet away from any open flame and at least 6 feet away from any roof edges, walls, or openings. Also, don't store propane cylinders inside or adjacent to buildings, sidewalks, or public areas. Tanks should be in secure, locked cages or fenced areas. Check the local fire code for storage requirements. Store cylinders upright and grouped together. Secure them around the middle with a chain, wire, rope, or ratchet strap. Before you have a cylinder refilled, check it for damage. If any part of the cylinder is damaged, tag it, remove it from service, and tell your supervisor. Now let's talk about using torching equipment. First, make sure the propane tank is at least 10 feet away, and 2 4A 60BC rated fire extinguishers are within 10 feet of torching operations. Make sure you have the materials you'll work with nearby. That way, you won't have to leave your torch unattended to go and get them. Wear proper PPE. Check that all valves are closed and all hoses and connections have been tested for leaks. When you're ready, slowly open the valve on the tank. The tank valve should be open completely when the system is being operated. Hold the torch in one hand and point the torch head away from your body, the hoses, and tanks. Now, open the pilot control knob to its lowest setting. This allows the smallest amount of gas to escape. Position the spark lighter near the torch head so you can strike it as you open the pilot knob. 2 notes of caution here. Never use matches or a cigarette lighter to light a torch. They could explode in your hand. Plus, you can't count on being able to hear the sound of the gas flowing before you strike the lighter. Carefully use your spark lighter to ignite the gas. Adjust the pilot flame so it burns steadily. Then, test the torch by opening and closing the hand lever. Torching wagons or trolleys have features similar to a torch. Propane supply hose, regulator, and propane trigger or squeeze valve with pilot control knob. However, they have 4 or more torch heads, mounted on a manifold that delivers propane to each torch head. To light a multi-head torching trolley or wagon, make sure the pilot control knob is closed. Open the valve on the propane cylinder. To light the first torch head, slowly open the pilot control knob. Allow a small amount of gas into the system. Light the torch head with a spark lighter. Quickly light each individual torch head the same way. Be careful not to reach across those already lit. You can also use a lit hand torch and pass it in front of the torch heads. This is often a safer method since it allows you to be farther away from the multiple torch heads. But be sure to keep your hands, face, feet, and clothing clear of the flames, whichever method you use. Each torch head may have a flame adjustment valve on it to regulate the intensity of the flame it delivers. Now, let's talk about some important precautions that can help make torch-applied roofing as safe as possible. Before you start torching, make sure combustible substrates and other hazards have been identified and properly prepared. If a building has a combustible deck or substrate, it must be protected by a thermal barrier. For CERTA compliance in field installations, the following are approved thermal barriers: 3/4 inch minimum fiberglass, 3/4 inch minimum perlite board insulation, 3/4 inch minimum stone wool board insulation, or 1/4 inch minimum gypsum roof board. The NRCA roofing manual and most manufacturer instructions also require installation of a base sheet or base ply over these thermal barriers before installing a torch-applied polymer modified bitumen base or membrane sheet. For CERTA compliance and flashing installations, there are 4 approved methods of installation: torch and flop using indirect torching of material, use of cold adhesives to install material, hot mopping of material, and direct torching of material using low output detail torch of 105,000 BTU or less. The torch and flop method requires a worker to first pre-cut and dry fit the modified bitumen piece in place. Then, set the membrane upside down over a non-combustible thermal barrier. Heat the modified bitumen with a standard torch by pointing the flame directly to the underside of the piece until evenly and thoroughly heated. Finally, flop the heated membrane and press into place. Direct torching using a low output detail torch always requires an initial installation of some type of backer material to prevent flames from penetrating below the flashing material. Examples include hot mopped base or ply sheets, or self-adhered peel and stick polymer modified membrane. The CERTA safety practices in your student manual describe acceptable backers in greater detail. Once acceptable backer installation is complete, a detail torch may be used for direct torching of the flashing material to the surface. This is ordinarily accomplished by dry fitting and cutting the flashing membrane piece to fit, tacking the top of the piece by heating it, and pressing it into place. Then, the rest of the piece is heated directly and pressed into place, ensuring that adhesion is uniform and complete, and edges and seams are tight. There are other instances where CERTA rules require using the torch and flop method. Use the torch and flop method when you're starting or ending a roll, or installing material around drains, vent pipes, or other penetrations where direct torching could cause the flame or heat to penetrate to areas below. Roof edges are special areas to consider when torching because there may be voids where the termination points of walls and the roof deck meet. Those voids may allow flame or heat to ignite materials below. If you're starting or ending a roll near a roof edge, roll the material out dry, with sufficient distance to give you room to work. Fold the sheet back, thoroughly heat the underside of the membrane, and then flop it into place. Around drains, vent pipes, and other penetrations, the technique depends on whether the piece can be installed as a continuation of the roll or a separate cut piece. If separate, dry fit and cut the piece, accounting for the dimensions of the penetration. Heat it and flop it into place. If on the roll, dry fit the roll up to the penetration and cut as required. Fold the cut portion back on itself, heat it completely, and carefully adjust it around the penetration. If you're using the torch and flop technique on a windy day, it's safest to work with smaller pieces of membrane. There are other areas and materials that should never come in contact with an open flame, including wood and fiber cant strips, lead flashings, wires and electrical conduit, natural gas lines, and oils or chemicals. Never leave a lit torch unattended. If you need to step away from the torch, this is how to do it. Rest the torch on its stand, pointing away from any walls, projections, and roofing materials. Never use a torch with a missing or defective torch stand. Make sure the torch hose is not tangled or the torch could flip over and ignite the substrate. And be aware of torches that have been set down. Make sure others around you know you're using a torch. If a small section of metal deck is available, use that as a portable base on which to set a lit torch to keep it safe. Here are a few other safety do's and don'ts. Never use a torch to warm, clean, or dry any part of a roof. On sunny days, be aware that an open flame may be especially hard to see. Increase the clearance distance between the torch flame and hazardous areas and other workers. When you're finished using a torch or torching wagon or trolley, follow this sequence to extinguish it. First, close the valve on the propane tank. Then, squeeze the torch trigger handle to flare off the remaining gas in the hose. Now, close the pilot valve and regulator valve. Let the torch or trolley cool, and then store the torch in a secure, locked toolbox or job box. Store torching wagons or trolleys in areas with other rooftop equipment, or remove them from the roof at the end of the day. A fire watch procedure is where a specially trained worker inspects recently installed torch-applied roofing materials to detect hot spots. In addition to keeping a watch throughout the day, he or she must continue monitoring the job for at least 2 hours after all torches have been turned off and all equipment and tools have been stored. Depending on building owner requirements, weather conditions, roof and building design, and adjoining materials, the fire watch could last longer. And a fire watch must be maintained during lunch or other breaks when torching stops to make sure the building is safe. Don't leave a building unattended at lunchtime if you've been torching. The fire watch inspects all areas of the roof, including below the roof deck and attic areas. He or she also checks that propane cylinders are turned off and properly secured in a safe place. An infrared heat sensing device is often used to detect hot spots around skylights, exhaust vents, grease traps, at flashings, and below the deck. The device is pointed at an area and the reading in degrees is marked temporarily on the roof. The same area is rechecked within a short amount of time to make sure the temperature reading is going down and not up. A higher temperature reading could indicate a fire. Did Mrs. O'Leary's cow Daisy really start the Great Chicago Fire? We'll probably never know for sure, but there is something we can be certain of. Any flame is a potential hazard, but if you're careful and follow recognized safety precautions, you can harness the power of fire and heat to help you install polymer-modified bitumen roof systems to protect building contents and occupants from the weather. Making sure everyone goes home safe and healthy at the end of the workday is what the CERTA program is designed to achieve, but it can only happen with your help. Thanks for watching.